Hello, my name is Justin DeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today we are talking the master of noir and more, Anthony Mann.
We return to a comfortable and familiar territory for this podcast, a studio director from the golden age of Hollywood who specialized in genres that are critically unheralded in their own country, but who the French critics and the crazed auteurists and the Manny Farber and Andrew Sarris type critics crowned an auteur.
Now, why does this guy get to be an auteur? Is it just because his movies are good? Yes, but it's also because he worked in genres like westerns, he mastered the noir, and most importantly, early on in his career, he worked with very meager resources. And from that is what people looking for auteurs are going to grasp onto.
He's best remembered for the 10 westerns he made between 1950 and 1958, including Man of the West with Gary Cooper, The Furies with Barbara Stanwyck, and a number with Jimmy Stewart, including Winchester 73, The Naked Spur, and The Man from Laramie. He wasn't exactly a B movie director.
No.
He started
as a B movie director, even like a C movie director.
But he worked with big stars on studio budgets throughout the 50s, but he made commercial films in popular genres. So I guess he would be considered a sort of A- director.
He liked to say that he was a worker. That's how he approached these projects.
The best kind of directors say that.
But he was also very passionate about the work that he did. And when we talk about his biography, I think it's clear why he was that way, because he came into making films kind of organically through the theater scene, and that he was also someone that would be involved in casting, scripting, that he brought in a lot of writers onto his projects that were handed to him from somebody else to kind of mold them as best as he could to his style. You see a lot of his movies, you're like, wait, who's this Philip Jordan guy he keeps writing for? Oh, wait, what is that the Woodman himself from The Front, the film about the blacklist where Woody Allen plays the Philip Jordan figure that everybody would use to hand in their scripts? Yep, that's right.
Incredible. One of the biggest challenges to appraising Anthony Mann as an auteur, but also one of the things that makes him interesting, is there are a couple of big identity shifts in his career.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was a director who worked on assignment on all sorts of different projects. I mean, he directed the Glenn Miller Story, for instance.
Right in the middle of his westerns,
Yeah.
because the Glenn Miller Story, which was a sizable hit, starred good old Jimmy Stewart, who was also in Mann's westerns.
And I haven't seen the Glenn Miller Story, but Dave Kerr reports that it's better than average for that kind of thing.
Yeah, here's the thing with Anthony Mann's films that are not genre films, like war films, westerns, noirs, is if you look them up, most of them are pretty middling in their reception. So, for example, I watched one of them, Serenade, and I watched an hour and I went, yeah, it's not good. So I just turned it off. I get it.
Well, basically, like I say, there are a couple of big shifts. In the 40s, he's primarily known as a crime filmmaker. That's when he's making B movies. Tough, two-fisted movies with small resources and not big stars, but very atmospherically shot. And it's in that decade that he develops a great alliance with the cinematographer John Alton. Mm-hmm. But then in the 1950s, he levels up. He starts making westerns with big stars. And that's the era that he's best known for. And then in the 60s, he levels up again to a full-on Hollywood A director making huge epics.
Well, that's where kind of like the B-movie genre directors go to die, like Robert Aldrich. What I was surprised to learn about those epics, which, spoiler alert, we didn't watch for this episode because Will said, please don't make me watch them.
No, last week we were arguing about this. It's like I was like, Anthony Mann, I love him. This is going to be fun. And you were like, but we gotta watch El Cid. And I thought maybe El Cid's great. I don't know.
You know, The Fall of the Roman Empire, which he made after El Cid, was a passion project of his.
Yeah.
It wasn't assigned to him.
Right. I just know that we have a week to prepare for this. And
those are 3.5 hours long?
Yeah, they're 3.5 hours long. And I don't typically like that kind of movie. I'll get to it. I promise.
Oh, you'll get to it. Because we're doing an episode all about the late period epic blockbusters.
Well, okay.
I threatened, yeah.
We'll do it. But this week's all about fun. This week,
you put the poison away only for it to accumulate even larger when you finally get to it. But this week's all about fun. We watch, all his movies are often short, punchy, and just like very effective in the way that they're constructed.
And I mean, I know Anthony Mann well enough. I've seen a number of those Westerns over the years because you see those movies if you love movies enough. But I didn't have a great sense of the full scope of his career. And with directors who have this particular kind of reputation, workhorse directors who over time developed a style, sometimes something I often see in like the critical reception about them is they catch a wave. Like there's a run of movies, like Phil Carlson had those crime movies, or Bud Bedecker, who of course made all sorts of great movies,
Westerns.
but in particular that series of Randolph Scott movies, like they find a groove where they're just working and not being bothered by a lot of people, and they find a style that is theirs. And I was wondering if that happened to Anthony Mann. But I gotta say, revisiting some of the crime movies, I watched a few scenes of like T-Man again, and but also watching his Robespierre film, which is a very like weird
Black Book, also known as Reign of Terror as well.
That's the title I saw it under. Like there is at the very least a visual identity that's very strong.
He's working with John Alton as well in those, and those are very distinct in the way they're constructed. But let's take a step back, give a little bit of a biography, and that I was very pleased to see, not from a showbiz family. Like he didn't get in there like, hey, well, my family's doing it, so I might as well just step in as well.
I mean, he seemed to have had a somewhat unhappy childhood. He was born in San Diego in 1906. His family actually moved to Austria for his father's medical treatments, but he stayed in San Diego until he was 14. Finally, he moved to New York as a teenager. His father died in 1923, and so he was pulled out of school to basically help the family with their finances.
But he somehow was able to become an actor, which I never knew until doing research into this.
He worked his way up. He began as a night watchman at a theater in Greenwich Village. From there, became an actor. I mean, the classic, like, started in the mailroom kind of story.
Oh, yeah. Which happens all the time, right?
That's
You're
right.
like, oh, wait, that's Jeffrey Katzenberg's, nephew or something like that. But he started in the mailroom.
I'm sure.
Jason Reitman worked fast food jobs. He worked his way up.
That's my all-time favorite. Like, I'm not trying to throw shade, but there used to be an episode of a podcast that Tiff put out called Jason Reitman From the Outback Steakhouse to the Oscars.
That was the name of that particular episode.
And it's like, oh, what? Did he eat there once?
And so Anthony Mann acted way more than I expected on stage, directed stage plays,
started his own theater company,
and while simultaneously doing bottom of the barrel like screen tests for David O. Selznick on stuff like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Gone with the Wind, Rebecca.
Okay, this is very important. I want everyone to go to YouTube and look up the screen tests for Rebecca and Gone with the Wind.
Can you hear Anthony Mann's voice in the background directing it?
He directed those.
Yeah.
He directed the screen tests. I don't know. See if you can see that John Alton-ish flair at those static shots of, Olivia de Havilland standing there.
And he worked with Preston Sturges a lot, which I think is important. Because
Preston Sturges was sort of his mentor.
Yeah, that Preston Sturges has a very almost antithetical, like anti-studio vibe, where Anthony Mann did work for studios, but he also did it almost like against the grain, that if you watch a lot of his movies, he was very focused on like shooting outdoors, that like he wants there to be a verisimilitude to what he's doing. And there's a great interview that he did near the end of his life where he says like, my heroes never really have victories at the end of the film. They're never exalted. They're exhausted. That's how I like to approach it.
Andrew Sarris, in his book, The American Cinema, he put Anthony Mann in that category, the far side of paradise, which means...
Oof.
Well, no, that's actually a good category.
Is it?
Yeah, so you have Pantheon.
Yeah.
That's where, Griffith and Chaplin and Keaton are. And then you have Far Side of Paradise, which is like second place, basically.
Wait, what is the one that...
Less Than Meets the Eye.
Oh, no, that Jerry Lewis is in.
He's in...
he's like an oddity one.
He's actually in like Send in the Clowns, I think. But there's Expressive Esoterica, which
That's what I'm thinking of.
That's my
Expressive
favorite
Esoterica,
section.
Yeah.
That's
Come
where,
on. When can we just like, that Andrew Sarris book where like, you've done us well, now let's put the dirt over the grave and let's get new people to write the new American cinema.
We can start tomorrow if you want. Look, I love the American cinema. It's probably my favorite book about film ever, but it was a starting point. Like, I would put Ulmer in the Pantheon.
Too sassy, Sarris. Man, I have so many Sarris books that I was literally going through them. And it's like, you ain't seen nothing yet. It's like, no, I won't be looking at this.
That one's a little less essential, I would say. But anyway, sorry, I brought it up because Sarris, when he was writing about him, he quoted himself in 1960, and I think he sort of walked this back a bit because one thing that was good about Sarris was he was constantly revising his old opinions. In 1963, he said, Anthony Mann is a style without a theme. His Westerns are distinguished by some of the most brilliant photography of exteriors in the history of the American cinema, and yet it is impossible to detect a consistent thematic pattern in his work. His best films are directed with psychological intensity and an undercurrent of didacticism. His most didactic film, Tin Star, is also his weakest. Now, I don't think Andrew Sarris necessarily stood by that for the rest of his life, and I don't think I would stand by it after investigating the movies because, I mean, when you look at the Westerns in particular, I think like the form and the content, there's an interesting tension between the form and the content sometimes. The Westerns are some of the most beautiful ever, and, you know, in front of this incredible painterly backdrop, this overwhelming backdrop are these very small-scaled, brutal, tough stories of
complicated stories
that
are going against the grain of what you expect like a, you know, cowboy Western to be, especially when starring Jimmy Stewart.
Yeah. And Jimmy Stewart in these movies, you know, the all-American, but also like one of the most complicated screen presences of all time. Like in the one that we watched this week, The Naked Spur, you know, there are no heroes in that movie. And it's a bit of a cliche to say this about Anthony Mann, but it happens to be true. When people talk about the revisionist Westerns coming in the late 1960s, early 70s, these movies were there 15 years before that, starting to tread that ground. Before The Searchers, you know, he was there helping complicate this genre.
All right. We should point out that if you're getting into Anthony Mann, you may go, I can't wait to see how he starts. You may want to skip the first 14 films that he made.
I mean, that's just, you know, with any of these guys, that's kind of part of the territory.
Yeah. Can you prove that you can make a movie? Do it 14 times? All right, you're good. Now you can make a good one.
Yeah.
Which is, most people say that his career basically, you know, really goes off once he gets working with John Alton and he directs T-Men from 1947.
And how would you describe that John Alton visual style?
Very intoxicating. It is the idea of what people think is a noir film. When you think of noir visuals, you are thinking of the cinematography, framing, and lighting of John Alton.
Think Calvin and Hobbes, Tracer Bullet.
Tracer Bullet?
You remember those Calvin and Hobbes strips where he's the detective?
Oh, where he's a detective, yes.
Yeah. You know, heavy, high contrast black and white cinematography, all the fancy effects like the chiaroscuro lighting.
Wide angle lenses close to someone's face.
You know, something in the extreme foreground, something in the extreme background. Neo-expressionist angles and jagged. Well, the production design isn't necessarily jagged, but the way it's framed is.
So me and Will, we've seen those noirs, T-Man, Raw Force.
Love them.
But so we decided to watch Reign of Terror, aka Black Book from 1949, which was made after these Westerns, but has the novelty of taking place during or actually post the French Revolution.
Yeah, and the weird thing about this movie is it's basically a paranoid noir movie, and the villain is Robespierre.
That's right.
Now, the politics of this movie, I don't know.
Hey, let's not give him too much freedom, right?
Look, folks, I'm just here to have a good time. I'm here for entertainment. Robespierre in this movie is the embodiment of evil.
Well, because he wants to take over a dictatorship, which Robespierre did want to do.
He wants to become the dictator, basically.
And that's what the firm individualists of this film are trying to prevent.
Right. And I've heard people try to make a case for this movie as sort of anti-McCarthyite in some way. I don't know if I buy that.
I mean, the fact that it's about like a book that's naming names, you could give it that reading.
Yeah.
And that like people are trying to, like, the whole idea is to get this book to prove that maybe you're on his list, which will cause you to like join the right cause and take him down. But when people talk about this movie, what they talk about is that, you know, all of these noirs, Mann and Alton weren't working with much, and that's why they're so dynamic, because like, how do you do a like French Revolution film when you don't really have the resources to pull it off? Well, let me just say, cool close-ups, mirrors, rear projection. That's how you do it.
I mean, I love the idea of just bringing this approach to a French Revolution movie where it's not that...
It's not grand.
It's not like cinema of quality, you know? It's a paranoid neo-expressionist noir movie.
I mean, that's like... He also made a film called The Tall Target, which is about a guy trying to prevent Abe Lincoln's assassination on a train. So like Anthony Mann, when he was working in those paranoid thrillers, he could just like, man, Reign of Terror sings. There's this whole sequence where like a bunch of people that are chasing our hero end up at an inn where a mother, there's like a million different things that are at play, has to keep away from him knowing, like, is her son going to reveal that the guy's hiding there? Will they be able to get the book from them? And they just sell it in close-ups and pacing. And, you know, these films aren't action-packed. Noirs usually aren't. But when they, like, explode and people are crashing through window, Mann just gets to do the most with the little that's at his disposal. Did you notice the end when it's like the big room where everybody's judging? It is all rear projections and like angles to make it look like there's hundreds of people watching them do this.
I love it. Very The Passion of Joan of Arc.
Yeah, absolutely. And so John Alton and Anthony Mann worked less than I thought they did together, because basically like they did those noirs. They did one called Border Incident, and then they did another one that we watched called The Devil's Doorway, and that was pretty much it for them. But you watched The Devil's Doorway, right, Will?
Oh, I love The Devil's Doorway.
So good.
I mean, what a fascinating movie. So it stars Robert Taylor as an indigenous, or in the parlance of this movie, American Indian.
So there's a lot of red face in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, so we should say that off the top. And it's a little bit like Charlton Heston in Touch of Evil, where it's like, to watch the movie is basically to say, okay, and now we're going to watch the movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Doesn't accept it. Especially this one that like...
It's like, those are the terms of the movie.
Yes. And him being indigenous is what the movie is about.
Yeah. Would it be great if it was an actual indigenous actor?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Would they let that happen in 1950 in a studio system? No, never.
So taking that all as granted, Robert Taylor plays an indigenous American soldier who comes back from the war.
Oh, so good. He comes back and he's like, you know what? The war's over. I think things are going to be better now that we're going to get along.
We fought together. I held the white man's head as he died. Why can't I be a homesteader?
Nope. Goes to the bar and racism right from the get-go.
And so he finds himself initially stuck between two worlds, and he thinks he can be a sort of bridging figure between these two worlds. I don't want to spoil everything, but one of the things I like about this movie is, among other things, I think the white liberals kind of come under fire, because there's the leading lady of the film where, I mean, there's a very heartbreaking, I think, scene where he says, on some level, do you think the white man has a right to my land?
Yeah.
And she hems and haws.
Well, she's like, well, everyone should, and he's like, do you think they have right to this land?
And it's like, well, we have nothing more to talk about.
Yeah. Oh man, so this movie coming out in 1950 is so emotionally complicated in the sense that like what it's presenting to you, what you think is the protagonist, and the way that you think it'll be like, oh, he'll be beaten down. I mean, Jimmy Stewart had a film called Broken Arrow that he starred in before this, and that's the only reason The Devil's Doorway actually it was held on a shelf for a while after it was made. Once Broken Arrow was a success, they were like, okay, I guess we can release this, because what you have in the center here is a character who's like, listen, this is my land. They're coming in. They won't even let me have it. They're letting the white people have it. But because I'm indigenous, they say it doesn't count. But I want it. And I'm just not going to give you any. That is our hero.
That's right.
And the film gets behind our hero, and he's killing people, but they're, and it's asking you like, is this right? In a way that like these movies never do. You usually see it as misery porn, but never like, well, this is the stand I have to take.
If you're coming to Anthony Mann hoping for a completely unproblematic depiction of indigenous people,
you're like, not, we're strong, but we suffered and now we're dead.
A complete either like 1992 Dances with Wolves or 2024, whatever the current politics are. You're not going to find it. But what you are going to find are movies that are probing this subject matter and that do not let the white characters off the hook.
No.
So I'm thinking of in Winchester 73, like these movies indulge in the tropes. Indigenous characters in Winchester 73, for example, they are a threat to the main characters. But you may remember in that movie, there's that scene where the chief basically says, he goes off on a monologue about how they've been cheated for years and years and years. And like, well, why shouldn't we fight back?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what Devil's Doorway is saying, which is like, why wouldn't we fight back? Because like if we let them come in, we're going to be eliminated.
And there's I think a devastating scene and a troubling scene, and definitely a problematic scene, but a troubling scene in The Naked Spur, where one of the characters in that film is, as he introduces himself, a dedicated Indian fighter, which means he kills
Indians.
Yeah. And there's a scene where our heroes, run up against a group of indigenous people, and Jimmy Stewart, who's leading them, is sort of communicating with them. Everything seems pretty peaceful, but this other character starts firing at them. And what follows is basically a massacre. And it's a scene not unlike what you would often see in movies like this.
Yeah, where the indigenous people would be the enemy and they just shoot them. And they're like, phew, I'm glad we got through that.
Cowboys and Indians shootout. And sure, that's problematic, but I mean, there's no glory after, and
No.
it's terrible.
Did you notice in the Naked Spur 2, after that gunfight, there's a lot of wide shots of all the dead bodies on the ground as they have conversations and as it would be in real life.
Yeah, it's devastating. It's terrible. And I mean, you know, you could say, and you'd be right to say, that the movie sort of disregards these characters or doesn't investigate them. But the cruelty of the scene has really, I don't know, it's lingered with me. It got under my skin in a way I didn't expect it to.
I will say that the Mann John Alton films, I sometimes find them overwhelming because it's just like gorgeous image after gorgeous image where I'm like, whoa, slow down, slow down.
No, every single shot is a one perfect shot. Just like the depths.
They've all been thought out. Like, how can we make this image as effective as possible? That sounds like a negative, because that sounds like MTV, like, every shot is crazy, but that's not what it is.
And like I say, with the Naked Spur in particular, I find something kind of interesting about the tension between that. I mean, the land is so glorious. I have a quote here from Anthony Mann that Jonathan Rosenbaum quotes in his review of the Naked Spur. Somebody asked Anthony Mann in 1969 what was the starting point for the film, and Mann said, "We were in magnificent countryside, in Durango, and everything lent itself to improvisation. I never understood why almost all Westerns are shot in desert landscapes. John Ford, for example, adores Monument Valley, but I know Monument Valley very well, and it's not the whole West. In fact, the desert represents only one part of the American West. I wanted to show the mountains, the waterfalls, the forested areas, the snowy summits. In short, to rediscover the whole Daniel Boone atmosphere. The characters emerge more fully from such an environment. In that sense, the shooting of the Naked Spur gave me some genuine satisfaction." So that's what he says. And there is one particular shot in the Naked Spur when the heroes or the protagonists are, you know, trudging along through this, you know, what looks like a summer day, but then you see the snowy peaks in the background. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, that it feels like in different planes of what we're looking at, different climates, both emotional and literal, are taking place.
I mean, all the French critics are right behind you, Will. They're like, yep, that's exactly what Anthony Mann was trying to say in that.
I just feel there's a tension between how glorious this atmosphere is and how dark and sad. And
I mean, we haven't even described the plot of the Naked Spur, which is that Jimmy Stewart himself, wasn't in the interview, which is like the question that was asked to him over and over again, why have you never played a bad guy? Which is 100% untrue.
That's somebody who's only seen It's a Wonderful Life.
Absolutely. He plays a bounty hunter who's bringing a murderer back, and he gets some help from some skeezy guys on the way.
That's right. He's on the way, and basically there's a guy who's like on top of a cliff who's pushing down boulders and rocks, you know, trying not to get captured. And he's an outlaw, and it turns out he's an outlaw from Jimmy Stewart's past. But along the road, there's an old prospector and a disgraced ex-soldier.
Yes,
the
bad man.
You know, the indigenous hunter, basically. And he recruits them to help him, but they want in now 1/3 of the share of the reward. And Jimmy Stewart needs that money so that he can become a homesteader again. He's somebody who is, you know, living a life of failure, basically, and wants to reclaim it.
And this is his one last shot to be able to do this. But the way that he goes about it, like any desperate man would, makes him less heroic than you would expect from a Jimmy Stewart picture, but also keeps the same kind of vein that you see in all of these Anthony Mann films. Every one of his characters is so complicated and does bad stuff to get to the goals that they want. Like The Furies, you know, one of his most famous Westerns, is all about like capturing land. Every character is just despicable in that motion picture.
And this movie is much like Bud Bedeker's Westerns of the time, where it's a small cast,
stripped down.
Yeah, aside from the indigenous characters that we see very briefly, it's just 5 people. And against this incredible backdrop, there's this psychological game playing between these 5 characters. One of them is the love interest, Janet Leigh,
who's like, the bad guy could have never murdered anybody. He's a good guy. Janet, you're wrong. You're wrong.
And the bad guy, played by Robert Ryan, is, you know, Jimmy Stewart is the ostensible hero by default, but Robert Ryan is cool and collected,
charismatic,
and a monster, and is always in control and is a master manipulator.
And so you follow them, and some moves that it did at the end of the movie, I was like, oof, that's rough.
Yeah.
In the way that it went about perhaps dispatching some characters.
Oh my God.
Or proving don't trust anyone, especially the devil himself.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about the end of the movie where you see Anthony Mann trying to struggle with, like, I need to give this a happy ending of some sort, but I also want people to leave being like, was that a happy ending?
Yeah. I mean, it works for me. Mm-hmm. I would have, you
would have been darker than like the way it ends.
I would have loved it to be darker.
Yeah.
But to me, everything that we see up to that up to that point makes it dark enough. You know what I mean?
And so Anthony Mann, like, nothing but bangers. If you haven't looked into his work, what are you waiting for?
Nothing, well, aside from that first 14. There's probably some good stuff in there. I don't know. Go panning for gold.
Any of the other ones that, like, in the middle where you're like, something like, I'm looking at the ones that are not noirs. The Bamboo Blonde. That one's probably good, right? Oh, I don't know about that. Like,
okay, so not nothing but bangers, but lots of good ones.
And he'll even, if you read interviews with him, he's like, Strategic Air Command, PU, not good, that he had to make with Jimmy Stewart.
I mean, one of the things that actually I find this kind of exciting about this kind of director, I like the fact that there are, the quality control of the complete filmography is not always there.
Oh, you mean he didn't have like a perfect 10?
Yeah, Mr. Tarantino.
No, yeah, you don't want that. You want to keep working, keep trying, and
then you'll find something.
Yeah, and Mann says, like, listen, we tried, we just couldn't break the back of that script, so you know what, I just had to keep moving.
I like a director who's not a fully formed genius,
or even as he goes along. You can't be.
Well, yeah, it's just interesting where it's like, yeah, he met John Alton, and then everything changed.
He asked for John Alton.
Yeah.
He's the one who like brought him in because John Alton had basically been shooting like the cheapest of the cheap westerns. He's like, I want this guy. Get him in here.
Yeah. And just circumstance and the genre that he was given, a lot of factors. The actors he worked with, the writer he worked with, it all.
The writers that he worked with, because he kept bringing them in. Even on El Cid, Sophia Loren asked for like a blacklisted writer to come in and like do rewrites on that film. A film that could be good, Will, even though it's 3 hours long.
Well, we're going to watch it eventually.
So as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
Before the letters, can I just throw in another quick plug
Go.
for our next event at the Fox Theater in Toronto? Yes, that's
Oh, Canada.
On July 9th, 2024, we are showing Joe Dante and Alan Arkash's Hollywood satire, Hollywood Boulevard. Remember, folks, when they were young trailer editors at Roger Corman's New World Pictures, they went to their boss, Roger Corman, and said, if you give us the money to make it, we can make the cheapest movie in your company's history.
Using mostly stock footage, which there's actually not that much stock footage in the movie.
But the stock footage they use.
Oh, it's the good stuff.
The cast.
Whoa, do we have an exploding helicopter of some sort we could utilize here?
The cast is unbelievable. You got Mary Warrenoff, you got Dick Miller, you got Paul Bartel. Godzilla. Is Robbie the Robot in there?
You know what? He probably is somewhere in there. You got giallo sequences. As Joe Dante says, I was watching a lot of Mario Bava around then, so that's why that's in here.
So yeah, 7 o'clock that night, you'll get to see us in person, and then stick around because at 9:30 they're also showing Ty West's Maxine,
which is a very good double bill thematically with Hollywood Boulevard. So our first letter is from Joe, and he goes, hey, Justin and Will, I'm a longtime listener, first-time writer, living in Scotland, and will be visiting Toronto at the end of July. Wow, from Scotland to Toronto. I've lived in Scotland for 2 years now, and it's taken me about that long to discover all the film things it has to offer, whether this be cinemas, DVD shops, record shops that sell DVDs in the back, or pubs with pop-up film screenings, and so on. This is a question we've gotten a lot, but I thought we could revisit it again. I was wondering if you guys would be able to suggest any must-see film things while on my trip. I've already got Bay Street Video on my list, and I'm bracing myself for a big spend. Also, thanks for putting me on Jess Franco and Jerry Lewis, both equally infuriating yet fulfilling watches.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Would love to hear an episode on, I'm going to get this name wrong, even though I've seen it before, Walerian Borowczyk.
The Beast.
That's right, The Beast.
Immoral Tales. Emmanuel 5.
Alain Robbe-Grillet, Jose Benazerov, I don't know who that is, or Jose Larraz for some odd European horror sex cinema.
I would like to know more about Walerian. Or
Have you not watched a bunch of his films?
You know, he's a bit of a blind spot.
Because Arrow put out a lot of them.
I know. Well, I have Immoral Tales, but I just haven't got around to it. So
you don't have The Beast? It's all worn out from watching it?
Yeah, listen. There's so much porn to get through, you know?
Yep. You don't need to watch the classy stuff. You need to work your way up to that.
Yeah, start on xhamster.com, and then once you've watched every single video there, move on to pornhub.com, and then watch every single video there, log them all on Letterboxd.
People, when they talk about Will, are always like, I see those pixelated photos every couple days.
It's not even every couple days. It's such a small percentage of what I log.
But that's all that sticks in their mind.
All that anyone remembers. Yeah.
And so film stuff, Bay Street Video. If you're going to see a cinema, Review is always playing interesting stuff.
Yeah, the Review Cinema. I would also suggest check out Cinecycle.
They don't do that many screenings though.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting this on people's radar. Go to Super 8 cineporter.ca, and you'll get the Cinecycle website. It's this OG Toronto cinephile named Martin Heath, who has been there forever.
Get in there before it's too late is all I'll say.
It's a shed just off Spadina, and you'll look up the address, and you'll get there, and you'll say,
is this it?
Where is it?
Yeah.
And I'll just say, go down the alley. And then
There's a big arrow pointing if you go far enough.
That's right. You'll find a shed behind one of Toronto's busiest streets.
It looks like a Rob Zombie murder shack if you walk in,
Yes.
but it's fine.
It's a bicycle repair shop where often they show...
Was a bicycle repair shop.
I don't know what it is now. It's a militia now.
Yeah.
And it's a fort. It's a compound.
Yeah.
And oftentimes there will be 16 millimeter screenings.
I mean, Trash Palace does it every month.
That's right. Go to Facebook and look up Trash Palace Toronto.
Yeah, see if it's happening while you're there. They show 16 millimeter shows every month, and they show a bunch of stuff like little shorts and stuff before that. Look at Eyesore Cinema. They do stuff every day in the back room. It's just a bunch of folding chairs, but really fun atmosphere, really welcoming as well.
Folks, if you're from New York and you know the Spectacle Theater, well, Eyesore is kind of our spectacle. Is that fair to say?
Yep. I mean, I went yesterday for a Mads Mikkelsen retrospective they're currently having, and I watched Clash of the Titans.
That's so funny. They'll sometimes show more obscure stuff too.
Oh, they show super obscure
They'll
stuff.
show like Bollywood movies and
Yeah, there's indie screenings of new films that happen there as well. Look at their calendar. I think they have something every day that's happening in the back room.
And then also the greatest film bookstore. It'll take you a while to get there on the subway. Not that long.
It's not that long. Yeah.
But it's in the East End and it's Hollywood Canteen.
Yeah, it's walkable from the subway station. So it's not like, I'm going to have to take a bus to get there. And it's on the main drag, too, because it's on Danforth, which is what the subway runs along.
And if you're one of us, if you're a movie guy, you'll get there and you'll say, where has the store been all my life?
And I don't know, see if something's happening at the Lightbox.
Yeah,
Cross your fingers.
Well, obviously, the Lightbox. The Lightbox shows film. So you may be there on a lucky day.
Hey, if you just want to see film books as well, why not just hit up the Toronto Reference Library? Go up to the top floor. They have tons of film books. You can just flip through. That's where I discovered Bertrand Tavernier's American Friends book, because it was a gigantic... I'm like, what the hell is this? I don't think I would have ever discovered it if I hadn't just wandered the aisles.
Oh, try to find the house from Black Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Why not?
Have you ever seen it? Is it part of U of T, I think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm certain I've walked past it. I'm not sure I could
We
tell
should
you.
do like a tour of locations, because like
Let's do it.
we've talked about it before and we've never actually like gone looking for them.
Do you want to do some video content?
Yeah, video content. We're pivoting to video.
Okay, this will be so cool. Let's spend a day.
Yeah.
We'll go to Allen Gardens and find out where Liam Neeson got the hand job in
Chloe.
We'll go to obviously Scott Pilgrim, and I'll start weeping, remembering my lost youth. And then
You never went to Lee's Palace.
no, but I've been at that intersection a lot.
Of course you've been there, because that's where all the cool stuff used to be.
First of all, I have been to Lee's Palace.
What did you see at Lee's Palace?
I've been a number of times. I went to the just last Halloween. I was there for some like cover band show.
I believe you.
Why would I lie? This is my city.
This is my city.
I don't go all the time.
Hey, visit the CN Tower.
Oh,
when you're
yeah.
in Toronto.
Yeah.
Have you been to the CN Tower? I don't think I've been here since I've lived there. It lived here.
I went in 2017.
Really? Oh, because you had family over, right? Or
I had a new girlfriend at the time. And we went to the CN Tower.
You went on the glass?
Who is my current girlfriend.
Oh, wait, but she lived in Toronto already, didn't she?
Yes. Yeah, she just moved.
Oh, okay, that's why.
So we went to the CN Tower. And then before that, I went in 1998.
Yeah, I think that was probably around when I visited my cousins in Toronto.
So, if current trends, maybe
Stay.
2045, I'll go again.
You'll teleport to the top of the CN Tower.
I want to keep brainstorming for our video of Toronto filming locations. We're going to go to the waterfront and we're going to see where they filmed the climax of Police Academy 3.
I've never seen it.
We'll go to George Romero's grave.
Oh yeah, haven't visited
That's in
yet.
Toronto.
Yeah, it is.
What else? That's probably it.
We can go look outside where Guillermo del Toro lives, I assume. He has a house here, right? I don't know where it is.
We'll recreate the opening credits of Kids in the Hall. We'll just go around and kind of like cavort in a park somewhere.
Yeah, pushing each other. People never skip that because they love the music of us cavorting.
Yeah.
All right, so I hope we gave you enough film locations to... I'm trying to think, is there like a poster? Nah, that's pretty much to name them all,
I'd
right?
say Hollywood Canteen. Well, there is a poster shop, but it's in North York. It's the Movie Poster Warehouse.
See what's playing at the Albion Cinema.
Albion Center. Okay, if you want to make a day of it, this might take you a whole day.
You have to take a bus to get there.
Yeah, or if you rented a car, but you'll
Lots of parking. So
there is lots of parking. The Albion Mall in North Etobicoke, you will find a great Bollywood movie theater.
Yeah, just see whatever's playing, make sure it's theater number 1, and you will be blown away by the presentation in that cinema, whatever is probably playing on that screen. So thank you very much for the letter, Joe, and I hope things go very well on your trip. And our next letter, this is a big one, is from Zachary, and he goes, "Hey there, Justin and Will. Longtime listener to the pod, first time writing in. I've had a cinema-curious friend ask me a question, and I'm in desperate need of giving him a concrete answer. How does one go about getting into Canadian film? He wants all of it. The early pioneers of filmmaking in the Great White North, the major milestone films and filmmakers from all across the country, and not just Ontario and Quebec. Wait, there's other filmmakers than that? Alongside what the contemporary scene has to offer. Teddy Bomb, Impossible Horror, great movies. I've had a hard time getting my mind around all that entails, so I thought to ask you two esteemed gentlemen to help. The friend is more than willing to read up on whatever books you might recommend, and he's got a copy of Gold Ninja Video Skip Tracer Blu-ray inbound to him as we speak to start on a physical library. Thanks so much for the help and for the countless hours of entertainment and insight you two provide every week. Warm regards, Zachary."
Well, Justin, you're very well read on Canadian film. What are some books you can recommend?
Well, book-wise, there's like Weird Sex and Snowshoes, which is kind of like the textbook that classes usually recommend.
They came from within?
They came from within. If you're looking for Canadian horror stuff, that's a really great book that breaks that down. Other than that, I haven't really found a like all-around guide that I've like really loved. Most of my big discoveries have been from like reading old dusty encyclopedias of films where like the author hates all Canadian cinema, but I'm like looking through and like, ooh, never heard of that movie. I would recommend a little featurette on a Blu-ray called Skip Tracer, which this guy says coming out, which I believe there's a featurette called like How to Get into Canadian Cinema, where I kind of talk about like 5 or 6 movies as entryways. I mean, when you're talking about Canadian cinema, what you're probably thinking of is a kind of hoser-loser cinema, which is what defines Canadiana when it comes to the big screen.
So Going Down the Road, Strange Brew,
The Rowdy Man, like films mostly about like loser characters who are going to suffer greatly by the end of the pictures.
Or you might also think of like The Sweet Hereafter.
Yeah, Adam McGoyan.
Like sad movies about incest.
Yeah, so I would recommend, like, if you want to get into the classics, the early Adam McGoyans are the most interesting ones. So like The Adjuster and all the other time-displaced movies that he made. Bruce McDonald, like Roadkill.
We probably don't have to say David Cronenberg.
No, we don't
right?
have to say David.
Yeah.
They know what that is.
If I were going to recommend some stuff that you might not have seen that might get you interested and might convey something of the Canadian identity. First of all, there was a Vinegar Syndrome partner label.
Yes, Canadian International Pictures.
Yeah, check out Canadian International Pictures.
5 years ago, I was like, I wish someone would start a Canadian... Oh, no, I think I was like, I'm going to start a Canadian Blu-ray label.
Well...
They're going to do that. Well, they beat me to it.
Well, that's okay. We'll do other stuff. But in particular...
I burned all my Canadian cinema books after this. No interest anymore.
In particular, they put out a recent release called Animation Night in Canada. I feel like a lot of the cartoons on that from like...
They're all NFB cartoons, National Film Board of Canada.
And you can find a lot of them on the internet too.
Yes,
but if you want them nicely curated, from The Big Snits to Pas de Deux by Norman McLaren, you'll find a lot of interesting things that really convey the Canadian identity.
They also have a set, the Quebec New Wave, I believe it's what it's called.
The Other French New Wave.
Ah, okay. And that's a good like starter set of a bunch of filmmakers that were mostly working under the auspice of the NFB or the French version, the ONF, and were sneaking in what were supposed to be documentaries, but like actually making narratives. I think we talk about it. We did a Canadian cinema episode, didn't we?
Long time ago.
And for people that aren't aware of it, Canadian cinema was basically forced into being a documentary first thing, that like they did not want narrative films. Like John Grierson, who came and basically made the NFB what it is, the National Film Board of Canada, he's like, documentaries, that's what we want. And it was only thanks to a bunch of filmmakers that were able to kind of sneak in fictional films did Canada suddenly start to build an identity of making like narrative motion pictures. And as long as they went and they played a New York Film Festival, then Canada's like, okay, we'll accept them, but otherwise we're not interested. Unless you're talking about Quebec, which have always had their own
thriving film industry,
thriving national cinema. So lots to go there. Canadian International Pictures is a great kind of way to get into it. So again, thank you for your letter, and I wish you the best. We haven't done a Canadian filmmaker in so long.
Let's do one soon.
Yeah, well, I want to do Gilles Cal, but I know you've never seen a single one of his films.
Hey, I'm down. So
Yeah.
who is he?
Gilles Cally's a Quebec filmmaker who made all sorts of like very, not kind of challenging and complex films that are very funny and very 70s-ish in the way that they go about stuff. Doing stuff like musicals, very surreal, almost Mad Magazine comedies at times. They're always on like retrospectives when like TIFF does them, then nobody goes and sees them because no one knows what they are. I believe on like TIFF had a list when they opened, like the Lightbox when they opened, of like the best Canadian films of all time. There were like 100 of them. I believe there were one or two of his films were in there. Most notably, I think it's La Mort d'un Bûcheron, which is the death of a lumberjack. That's the one that people usually go to as like, oh, this is the Gilles Cal film to watch. So again, you can email us at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. What are we doing on our Patreon this week, Will?
This week we went to the drive-in. Not just any drive-in.
That's me honking a horn.
We went to the 5 drive-in in Oakville.
Which I don't think we've ever talked about on this podcast before, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's a drive-in about 30 minutes from downtown Toronto, and we saw the new film Inside Out 2. We talk a bit about that. We also talk about the drive-in experience, and we talk about other cartoon-related matters.
Yeah, public domain VHS tapes that were just handed to Will, and a new cartoon as well. But you'll have to check that out on patreon.com/importantcinemaclub. So next week, speaking of Canadian cinema, we're doing a Canadian filmmaker.
That's right. We're going to be talking about Bruce McDonald, who is a member of what was called the Toronto New Wave.
Really? It was called the Toronto New Wave? Who was part of that?
Adam Egoyan?
Yeah.
Probably some others.
Miscellaneous. Patricia Rozema, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Don McKellar.
Yep. I heard The Mermaid Sing. And so, I mean, Don McKellar, he's like with Bruce McDonald because he starred in his first film, Roadkill, which just got released by Canadian International Pictures.
That's right. So Bruce McDonald, you may know him from Roadkill. You may know him from Hardcore Logo. You probably know him best if you know him from Pontypool. He's been around for a long time. He has an almost Richard Linklater-like career.
Yes, absolutely. Which is like very experimental in the way that he approaches things.
Yeah.
But also, he's like, I'll make a commercial one. I got bills to pay.
I mean, yeah, Bruce McDonald directs a lot of TV. It's very easy to tell oftentimes what are the personal ones and what are the commercial ones. The personal ones, you know, he doesn't always hit it, but often enough he does. And yeah, I would say what I find most interesting about him is that experimental nature. He's always trying stuff. Like, you remember the Tracy Fragments.
Yes, a film that's shot all in like multiple screens, like split screens, and throughout the entire film.
He released all the footage of it online.
He did? So you can make your own version?
When it was new, yeah.
That's cool. I like that. And he also made Dance Me Outside about a bunch of teenagers on a reservation. Have you ever seen that one? It's good.
I haven't, but what's this one? My Babysitter's a Vampire
well,
from 2010.
Well, that's one of his one for them projects.
Apparently his second most popular movie on Letterboxd.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably one of those like, my generation. We saw it, it played on the Family Channel all the time.
That's right.
So we're going to be talking, I think, Roadkill, his first film, Hardcore Logo, probably his most famous film, I would say. And then let's do Picture Claire from 2001, which was I don't think it was a studio film, but it's the one where he worked with the most famous like Hollywood actors.
Big Hollywood stars, Juliette Lewis, Gina Gershon, and Mickey Rourke.
I think Mickey Rourke is briefly in the film, if my memory serves.
And it's got a picture of Juliette Lewis holding a gun. So it looks like one of Raul Ruiz's...
That's exactly what it feels like,
One of his Daniel Baldwin movies.
And all of Bruce McDonald's films, I think, they all take place in Toronto, too.
Yeah.
Like, they're very kind of like rooted in where Bruce McDonald's from.
So it's a career that I like and respect, this guy who's been around for a really long time.
And I always think of the story when he won some filmmaking award and he had his trademark cowboy hat that he wears all the time.
That's right.
And he went to go get, I think it was a big novelty check, and he said something like, I'm going to buy so much weed with this. So, yep, he rules, and he's who we're doing next week. Until then, my name's Justin LeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. As per usual, I would like to thank some of the new patrons who include Nick, Adam Roberts, Brandon Melling, Pow, Shay Kelleher, Chris M., Stephanie, Suzanne, William Jones, Jacob Skidmore, and Patrick Carroll. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing this without you.
So we're going to weigh in on the rap battle between Kendrick and Drake.
Is it still going on?
Oh, is it still going on?
How many tracks have they released at this point?
So Kendrick Lamar was just on stage at a huge concert in LA, broadcast on Amazon Prime, and he brought members from the Crips and the Bloods on stage to dance together, all united against Drake.
Wait, what?
It's true. Well, everything I said is true.
It's like you just made something.
He brought members from
you following this closely?
No, I'm not. I was not at all until yesterday when this happened. When I saw this clip of somebody said he brought the Crips and the Bloods on stage to dance together, all hating Drake, and he got everybody to sing about Drake being a pedophile at this huge arena. I read that and I thought, okay, I'm going to devote a little time to this. I'm going to read up on this because I like this. This is showmanship.
The last time I read about it was like 3 weeks ago when they were releasing like track after track after track. I thought it was done.
Who can keep up with that? So I'm reading the lyrics of his song Euphoria.
Yeah.
Which is the one he sang the other night. And I'm reading it and it's like, this is hieroglyphics to me. You need to be so, and millions of people are.
Oh yeah, we're not.
You need to be so deep into the lore to know anything that he's talking about here. But apparently Drake like bought Tupac's ring at an auction and like he's making fun of him for that. And at one of these diss tracks, Drake used AI to do the voice of Tupac.
To be like, Drake is right. I agree with him. But listen, we're from Toronto.
I don't know why I brought this up.
Drake is from Toronto. I did see one tweet that was really funny where a guy was like, I hope this Drake beef is so embarrassing for Toronto that house prices drop so then things become affordable again.
Do you remember, what was it, like 7 or 8 years ago, kind of the Rob Ford era, Drake was Toronto's favorite son.
Was he? So I never followed this. I know
neither did I.
Yeah.
But you didn't remember our cool city councilor Norm Kelly, the old man,
the guy who replaced Rob Ford when Rob Ford had to step down,
the interim mayor. That's right. Norm Kelly was an elderly husk, a man who was 80 years old. I think he's still alive. I don't know why. He's not in politics anymore.
He's been permanently 80 years old for like 50 years.
He was an old, like, center-right city councilor who his staff like started tweeting from his Twitter account like in rap slang. They're like, Meek Mill, you're not allowed in this city anymore. and then all of a sudden he became like, I mean, this was a long time ago. The stakes of a viral story were not what they are now. So back then it could be like, hey, this elderly husk of a city councilor is tweeting about rap. Isn't that funny? And so for like a couple of years after, Norm Kelly he'd be like brought out on stage with Drake and he'd have this deer in the headlights look of like, where am I?
Who is this?
Who is this man? Wait, are you allowed to drink at the same fountain as me now? What year is this?
I mean, listen, all our mayors have been very good and we've never had any issues.
Every single one of them knocked it out of the park, including the current one who's great.
No one can see the face.
Not a disappointment at all.
Yeah, and so, speaking of Rob Ford, now this is something that I'm going to tie it to movies eventually because there's a classic Rob Ford movie, right? What is it called again?
Well, so you're talking about the one he was in?
No, not the one. Yeah, he was in one, right? Did you go see that in theaters?
Yeah, I saw it in theaters. There was a.
We need to let people know who Rob Ford was in case it was pretty like international news. Yeah,
they might have forgotten. We might have younger listeners. Rob Ford was a right-wing mayor that we had for a while, who was a
big dumb doofus.
He was very large.
He was like the real evil Chris Farley.
He was, and that's everyone said he looked like Chris Farley.
Yeah,
he was
none of the charm.
He was stupid and he was racist and he was an asshole.
You missed a very important thing. He also smoked crack.
I'm building up to this. He drove everybody downtown insane.
Yes, but there'd be videos of him like shoveling snow.
He was very good at answering constituent phone calls.
Yes, and he did it for real too.
Fucking people, he answered every single one, including when he was internationally famous. People would call him.
He was a real Matt Farley.
And then like 3 months later, he's like, this is Rob Ford returning your call. And they'd be like, never mind.
Yeah. I mean, he wouldn't do anything.
No. Like, he might come over and fill in your pothole or whatever.
Yeah.
While he was cutting library funding or something.
But he was just the puppet of his evil brother that is now the premier of our province.
Oh my God. Yeah. Every bit of an oaf and a doofus.
Man,
Rob Ford.
I vivid memories of following this like day by day.
Well, the week.
No, it was like 2 months. No. Basically that like news reporter said, I saw a video of Rob Ford smoking crack.
That's right.
That's what came out.
And there are gangsters in Etobicoke who, if we pay them,
holding it hostage.
If we pay them a certain amount of money, and there was a Kickstarter campaign to get the amount of money for this gangster to turn it over.
And this sounds like such a joke. Spoiler alert. It was real.
It was real because so the reporters lost touch with the gangsters. But then 6 months later,
Yeah, how did it come out? Like,
well, 6 months later, there was a police raid on
Right.
an apartment building in
And that's
Rexdale.
where they got it, yeah.
And the police chief said, we found a video on one of these phones that corresponds with reports in the press. And then that was the week
now,
when...
do you remember when they said, hey, there is a video of you smoking crack and saying racist things, and Rob Ford went, you didn't ask the right questions.
Yeah,
That's
that's right. Yes, I have smoked crack cocaine, he eventually said. And there was a whole week when every day we were like, is he going to resign? Is he
Did he
going to
resign?
resign?
I don't even remember.
He never resigned. No, he did eventually because he had cancer.
He had cancer. He had to step
he
down.
died. Did we
Yeah,
mention
he
this? Jesus.
You know, yeah, he's dead now.
He's dead. But his legacy lives on. Anyway, we tied it back to film because there's a video of him smoking crack.
No, that's not what I was going to say.
Which did eventually come out, and you can watch it right now.
You can go on YouTube. You can find it. It's like everything the reporter said was in that.
If you lived in Toronto, it was all you talked about for a year. And now it's just
It's
out.
so funny. No consequences afterwards. The only reason he stepped down is he literally got cancer and died.
That's right.
That's the only reason.
If he had run again...
he'd still be mayor.
Yeah, if he'd run again, he still would have won.
Yeah. And no, what I was talking about is you must have seen the movie about this thing that fictionalized everything around
There
it.
were a couple. There was a comedy movie.
It's not the comedy I'm thinking
but
of.
I know the one you're talking about. Was it called Run This Town?
Yeah, I think it was Run This Town,
No,
right?
I didn't see it.
What, you didn't see it?
I was a bit over the Rob Ford thing by this
You're
point.
tired by it.
I'm excited.
He was dead and buried at
Well,
that
now
point.
that we're talking about him, I'm remembering how enthusiastic I was at the time.
I literally remember like jumping into the office and being like, "Oh my god, this news update!" to like the 55-year-old women who also worked with me at the time. Everybody was in on it. Like we were all following it beat by beat.
That week when the police chief confirmed that the video existed was also the same week of I have more than enough to eat at home.
Wait, was that the same week?
That was the same
that
week.
Rob Ford.
Yeah. Oh, and this woman who said I ate her pussy.
I have more than enough to eat.
Plenty enough to eat at home. That was, oh man, what a king.
He ruled, and we voted his brother into a position of even more power.
I didn't do it. Not me.
Not me either.
Anyway, and he'll be premier forever.
Yeah. So that's the movie. Are we doing a Patreon episode on the Rob Ford crack video?
I wish we could find that movie that he was in. Which
It never came out, right?
it played at the Yonge and Dundas Cineplex.
I know it did, yeah. And you went and saw it?
I was there opening night in a room full of people who were in the movie. So I felt
maybe people seeing it ironically?
I think there were at least.
Wait, so you were there at the first screening of it?
I was there at the first screening opening night of its theatrical run.
Wow.
Which lasted a week. It was four-walled, obviously.
Yeah.
The movie was called Torrana. Torranah.
Yeah. It never escaped a Tubi or anything like that?
No, it probably exists on a thumb drive
What
now.
was Rob Ford's role in that?
He shows up at the beginning. He's driving a car. I remember
Yeah.
that. And then he shows up again at the end, I think. Oh, and Doug Ford shows up at the end.
Okay.
But the whole movie, it's like it's not inept. It's inept. It's,
Yes, yeah.
it's
It's very,
unreleasable.
yeah.
It's a bunch of businessmen in like and like not classy businessmen. You know
So
what I
it's
mean?
not like, your favorite Toronto filmmaker.
Frank D'Angelo is Martin Scorsese next to
Wow.
Torrana. Yeah.
Tirana, you know what? This is the day the clown cried of Toronto.
Yeah.
It's Tirana.
If anyone has a file, please send it my way.
And speaking of other Rob Ford appearances, I know we went from Drake to Rob Ford. I mean, he's an actor. We could have talked about that.
Yeah, Degrassi.
Never watched it.
Yeah,
Did you watch it?
No.
And I'm sure he was in a movie or two, right?
Probably.
Yeah. But now
He's dead now, though. So
Drake?
Yeah,
basically Kendrick Lamar
killed him.
fucking roasted him.
Yeah,
We'll keep you updated next week on the Kendrick Lamar Drake beef.
we're gonna write our own diss track.
There's going to be a movie that's going to come out about this.
Oh.
And then we'll see it.
I can't wait.
And you know what? It'll be animated in Lego.